Welcome to Home or Drink with Charleen and Ellie. Our podcast is like a group chat between your best friends. The girls brought you on a night out where you spill all the gossip on relationships, dilemmas, and life. If you're a return listener, welcome back. And if you're new here, welcome.
Welcome.
Still don't feel real that people listen to us every week.
I know, yeah.
Sometimes I think about it, I'm like, oh,
I
that's
wonder
really scary.
what goes through people's heads when they
I
listen to us.
know. Probably nothing.
Yeah.
Monkeys.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding. Monkey with the cymbals.
Oh.
Home or Drink is out for you every Wednesday at 12 p.m. We also have bonus episodes every Monday at 12 p.m. You can listen to more of us now on the GoLoud app or wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also watch us now on YouTube. So our weekly podcast episodes are uploaded to YouTube every Thursday at 12. This week we have very special guests. So Niall Breslin joins us to tell us all about his new podcast series, The Madman's Hotel, and to talk about his life and his changing careers and just
Bit of everything.
a bit of everything. My mom is absolutely
Oh,
delighted we got
my
Bressie on.
mother is
She's like,
going to.
she texted me like, on we originally were to do Tuesday. She's like, good luck today with Bressie. I was like, oh, it's actually Thursday instead. She was like, well, good luck then Thursday.
My mother's going to be the first
She'll-
person to listen.
Literally the first
The
listeners
mommy
ever.
love Bressie.
Literally. So this week, like we said, we're joined by Niall Breslin. Welcome to Home
How
and
is?
Drink.
Hi.
What's going on?
We need to ask you first. Should we call you Bressie or Niall?
Honest to
What do
God,
you like?
the whole Bressie thing came when the voice put my name in the back of a chair, and they wouldn't change it. So like,
Oh,
I have other nicknames that I'd rather you not call me, but
right.
either of those are fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Niall or Bressie, I'm pretty.
So did
fan
they
with.
make up
Go
the
by both.
nickname Bressie?
No, I was called Bressie, but like it didn't want my name in the back of a chair in RTE, but they couldn't fit Niall Breslin, so
Okay,
I
so
got
there's
Bressie, and that was it. And I was like,
stuck.
RTE were like, we're not changing your chair. I'm like, grand.
I used
Perfect.
to love the voice.
Yeah.
I was hooked. Loved it.
I stressed about it.
Does
I-
that
like,
feel like
Excellent.
years ago now, or?
Well, it was 5 years of TV, and I had never done TV before, so I was
Wow.
completely all over the shop for the first year. Like, and then like the first part of it was like pre-recorded, but you do 5 shows in a day, and you'd be there for 14 hours, and by the end of it, you still have to say the same thing. But like the families would be sitting in front of you, kind of giving you a stink eye, kind of going.
Oh,
hit the-
throwing you
and
20 quid.
Oh
Like,
no.
like the lads singing five keys out of tune, and they'd be like, hit the button. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
I
God.
can't
already
really.
hit the button
yeah.
here. But yeah, I mean, I definitely was a serious experience because I'd never, as I said, never done television. But would I do entertainment television again? Not a hope.
Would you know?
No,
Really?
No. Is it just the long hours that you think now?
it's a
No.
different thing,
Yeah.
and it's like I mean, really enjoyable, unbelievable crew. But I found it just not what I kind of made a
What you
very
thought.
definitive decision when it was over. I had an agent in UK, and he was like, oh, "I'm going to put you forward for." Oh, no, I'm good.
No.
I'm
No,
done,
thank
and that was the end of my TV.
Wow.
Was it?
Yeah.
Is it very emotionally draining? Because you have all these people who are who really want it, and like, I'd be pressing it for everyone.
Well, you see, that's your problem, and then
Yeah.
you know the voice wasn't like the expert. You weren't throwing people under buses.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't
No.
great. You couldn't go. You're not good. You'd have
Okay.
to find a reason. There's only so many ways you can tell people they can't sing.
They can't.
It's-
Yeah.
And other thing about it is, like, I never ever sold myself as a brilliant singer. I wasn't that at all. Like, and that's not why I was there. I know what I like with voices, and I like voices that aren't very good.
Okay.
I don't like perfect voices.
Right.
I don't like really brilliant technical, like
Yeah.
the Mariah Careys, who are obviously some of the greatest vocalists of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Their voices don't do a lot
Doesn't
for
do it
me.
for
I
you,
don't.
like-
I listen to kind of singers who you probably think they're not great singers, but I love them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So that was my thing. So RT were like, you got to pick a few Mariah Careys. I was like, right.
You're like,
no,
oh.
I
Yeah.
want the I want the off key.
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
You've had quite a varied career in what you've done. So you started in rugby. So how many years did you play rugby for?
Well, I actually was a Gaelic player. I started as a Gaelic
Oh.
footballer. I loved Gaelic. Absolutely loved it. I played down in Westmeath, and we had brilliant underage teams. And then
Wow.
I was huge. I was 6'6" when I was 16, and they were like,
Jeez.
"You're gonna play rugby." I'm
Yeah.
like,
Were you
okay.
6'6" when you were 16?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was a big young lad, and I kind of just started playing. And like Mullingar is a brilliant club there, Mullingar Rugby Club, and
Mhm.
I kind of just like everybody, I just fell into it. But like when I became a professional rugby player when I was 19, 20, and I had to give up Gaelic football, and it broke my heart.
Did it?
Yeah,
You had
I
to-
love.
Were you given like the choice between the two?
You can't do both. Like you just couldn't. It was just
Do
so much.
both,
It took
yeah.
so much work. And I mean, I don't miss rugby at all. I miss Gaelic football. Gaelic football is so simple.
Did
Like I played
Yeah.
professional rugby for 3 years, and I still didn't know the rules.
So,
Like, I
Really?
genuinely didn't know what I was doing half the time. Yeah,
Really?
So, but Gaelic there's a lovely simplicity to Gaelic football,
Okay.
Yeah.
and hurling is a lot more skillful, but there's still a simplicity to it.
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
And that's why I loved the sport, and I loved my teammates, and I loved the community thing. And that's what I miss from sport more than anything, not rugby.
Would you ever
Well.
go back? Can you do Gaelic? No, Gaelic. Oh, Gaelic. not rugby.
By even saying it out loud, I'll tear my hamstring. My body isn't.
It's not
Fits.
able.
No.
I cannot do any of it. Like, and the thing about it is, like, I always have these little our lads. Like when you hit your 40s, you start doing things like Christmas. They'll have a Christmas. They go, lads, we'll have like a charity football
Yeah.
game or
Yeah.
a charity five-a-side thing. Every one of them, Stephen's Day, are just sitting in the pub with torn hamstring.
Yeah. Just
So
in
Bit-
bits in
bit
the
of
It's not
pub.
worth it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. You know when the
Oh.
body's giving up and you stop.
And when did you decide to stop the rugby?
I got probably 2.5 years into it,
Okay.
3 years,
Wow.
and then decided that the obvious movement then into music.
Yeah.
I retired from rugby and
Yeah.
started a band. I had nothing else to do, like, and the band quite quickly did well. We signed to Universal Records, and it just took off very quickly, and that was it. That
Wow.
was rugby was in the rear view mirror.
And did you like? So going from rugby to music, like, what is that like as a transition in your everyday of what you're doing? Like you're going from being so active to not.
It was great.
Yeah.
Was it?
really.
Yeah.
It was great.
Your
yeah.
body's feeling great.
Yeah.
It was it was funny because my rugby agent was a guy called James Adams, who
Yeah.
was a South African guy, and he said to me when I said I was retiring, he was like, "Great," and he'd worked so hard for me, and then he said, "Send me your demo." So I just thought he was trying to be nice about it, so I sent him our demo, and it was grand, like a 4-track thing we did, and he shared an office with the Oasis manager, Marcus Russell.
Oh.
We were huge Oasis fans,
Wow.
and 3 days later in Eamon Doran's in Temple Bar, the Oasis manager was in the front row.
Stop.
Yeah, so that was the kind of stuff. So it was mad. It was just it just took off, and I think a lot. I was kind of playing gigs when I was still playing rugby, and I remember doing a gig in Mullingar. We had played Munster the night before, and I'd broken my nose. So my nose was 2 black eyes, cut ear, and a broken nose, and I had to go up and sing. And there was about 12 people there, and they were all terrified of me, so they clapped. But that's when I said I better decide: do I want to play music or do I want to play
Or
rugby?
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you definitely can't play Gaelic and rugby. You
And
definitely can't play
yeah,
music.
you
and
can't do
rugby.
it all.
No.
Like, was music always a thing in your life, or
Yeah, my mum's a music teacher.
okay?
So my
you
mum
loved it, yeah.
was classical, violin, piano player. So she used to give lessons in our gaff, and
Wow.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard anyone getting violin lessons. It's pretty painful.
You
Oh,
did them, did
Yeah.
you?
My poor family.
Oh my
For
god.
4 years. I don't know if it's
Bad.
10, but I'd say for 4 it was like like
Right.
a cat
Hell.
scratching.
3 hours a day in our house.
No.
I was just studying for my leaving cert, and I
was
remember
probably
going
me,
down
I was
to
probably
one
the
young
same.
fella and going, "You're useless.
Uh,
Stop playing."
Yeah,
He
you
just didn't
can-
want to be there. Like,
Oh,
horrible.
no.
Yeah.
I used
don't
to
mind.
cry walking to violin lessons.
oh,
Because
it's,
you didn't
it's
wanna
so
go?
yeah. I was like that with piano lessons because my piano teacher used to hit me in the fingers. And yeah, when I used to play, and so I
Oh,
used to
God.
want to do that, but ultimately I'm delighted I did because it's
Yeah.
my favorite instrument. But my mum, yeah, music is. I always say sport is what I did. Music is what I am.
Okay.
I love
Yeah.
music. I love all aspects. I love most music. I love playing it. I love writing it. I love listening to it. It's just such a privilege.
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky I have it.
And do you think that like sport and music makes you like, redisciplined then in life in other areas?
Yeah,
I feel like because I feel like when I done violin, it taught me how to like keep doing something even when you're kind of shit.
Even when you hate it.
Yeah, like
well,
it's a
discipline
nice-
is important. Like
Yeah.
the thing about it is, no matter what you want to excel in,
Mhm.
or whatever craft you want to do, you do need a discipline. Like there's
Yeah.
days you don't want to be doing it, and there's
Yeah.
days that you have no interest in it.
Yeah.
But I think disciplines are showing up. Like that's all it was. But I think when you're a professional athlete, you're very structured.
Yeah.
Everything is completely structured. When you're a musician, you're completely unstructured. There's no structure.
True, when
Yeah.
you're on your
So you have
own.
to figure out how to bring that into your
Yeah.
own thing. But even when you're touring, like touring is just. I look back. We used to call them toilet tours. We tour the UK. Like you play the worst venues, and this is the way you earned your stripes.
Right.
You go into the worst venues in like Hull on a Sunday night. When I remember playing Hull on Sunday night, there was one person there, the barman, and even he left. That's how you build your
Shit.
reputation.
Your ego goes
Yeah.
out the
Do it,
door.
But you gotta do it.
You have
That's how
to, yeah.
A lot of bands come up to me now and go, oh, or like they've kind of made their name on TikTok, but they've never got on a live stage.
Mm.
You have to get into the live craft. That's
Yeah.
where you learn.
Do you think there is such a big difference now? Because, like you just said there, I feel like a lot of up and coming things nowadays are like that on TikTok and Instagram and people being found online. But do you think there is a big difference of interacting with a crowd and just sitting in front of your phone?
Well, you can't.
Yeah.
Like stagecraft is something you cannot learn on your phone. You just
Yeah.
can't.
Mm.
It
Yeah.
is like you need to die in front of a crowd. You need
Yeah.
to have the best time. You need to go through all of those different things.
Big
You need
waves,
to,
yeah.
especially if you're if you're a front man or front woman, you need to be able to how do I read the audience, all
Yeah.
of that kind of stuff. You just can't get that on the phone. Now, in saying all that, like TikTok has certainly opened huge marketing capacities for acts and bands. And I think when it started, and I think social media started, it was so exciting for music. Now it's just got really stale because it's all about you're not they're certainly not going to promote your music unless you're paying for it now. So it's
Okay.
just turned into
Yeah.
another marketing tool. It's
Yeah.
not. And then there's acts that
Sad.
break. Some acts break, and some get
Yeah.
huge followings. But I'd say if you pull the thread in that, there's definitely a label behind some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to make it look like it's a
It's
TikTok
not.
thing.
Yeah.
100%.
Ultimately, do I think it's been good for music? No,
Okay.
No.
I
yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
That's my old lad in my day. Shite, but that's
No, it's
that's
true.
yeah.
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 There is a difference between working a crowd and.
Well, I'll
and
give you an
not.
example of what I mean. Let's say Hosier.
Yep.
Hosier didn't become Hosier overnight.
No.
He
No.
was developed, and he was developed from the age of 15. He was heard. I think his manager Caroline heard his son he was singing. I think George and Bray was where he went to school, and he was singing. And I remember hearing him when he was 15 or 16. Somebody sent me a demo. I was like,
Oh,
oh
wow.
my God, this guy, this you hear it. You go, this is something very special.
Yeah.
I hope he's developed. I hope he's given time. I hope he finds his sound. And he was developed over 5 years. I think it was 4 or 5 years before Take Me to Church came out. And then that's what he wanted. He wanted because he came over to write with us when we were living in London, and we were the wrong people for him because we were like
Really?
pop production team.
Yeah.
Okay.
He wanted to make a gospel-y kind of sound, and he found a sound. He was allowed to develop, and even when he first started playing live, he was very shy. Now, if you go see Hosier, he's
Come
a
on the
superstar.
stage.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he didn't become a superstar
Yeah.
overnight.
Yeah.
So that's craft.
Yeah.
That takes time, and I think if you even other acts like Prince, like the big thing for brilliant artistry is development. It takes time to get comfortable on stage, to get
Yeah.
comfortable with your sound. I'm not sure TikTok's giving people that time.
That,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, even his new song, Hosier's newest song, what's it called again? I'll take my whiskey.
Oh,
What's it?
sweet.
It's not
It's
whiskey.
like it's number one in
Yeah.
America.
Is it
Too sweet.
Too sweet.
Too sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently his label didn't we're like that shit, like that won't do well.
Didn't
and
like it?
someone put a snippet on TikTok and it blew.
No
See,
And it
that's
was
what's
number one.
brilliant for TikTok because it's a brilliant
That's
marketing
why it's
plan.
good
Yeah.
sometimes.
And
Yeah.
labels love it because it's free marketing.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, they don't have to pay these big marketing budgets to go and push stuff. So
Just
it
get
does
someone to
work.
make a TikTok.
There's
Yeah.
elements to it for me, but I do think it's really important that, like, if you're a musician, two things matter: a body of work, an album, you got to make a record, and your stagecraft.
Yeah.
And maybe you can do that way, but I think it's don't think that you can create a real career by just being in front. You gotta
Yeah.
get out and do that groundwork, and
Yeah.
it can be terrifying for people who might be anxious in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
It can be tough. Like
Yeah.
so, I think that's something
That you
where
learn.
TikTok allows for people to have an audience who might go, I don't want to play live
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'd fall apart if I played live,
Yeah.
and that's fine too.
And would you have been really anxious when you started singing live? Is that like, were you scared at first or no?
No,
No.
I don't know. I've never had social anxiety because, like, when you're on stage, you've no time to think.
Yeah.
Give me time to think, and I'll fall apart.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, you're just thinking what's
quiet.
next, what's on.
When you're on stage,
Yeah.
you're not thinking. And
Yeah.
some people have social anxiety. Some people just have kind of good old fashioned general anxiety,
Yeah.
like me, where I just like I could be watching Netflix and eating a tube of Pringles and be like, the
Can't
world's
breathe.
ending.
Yeah.
Like, that's me.
Me.
Yeah. Put me on stage, show them grand.
I kind of like that. I think if I'm watching a film, I don't like watching films because I just get anxious.
I,
then I
I,
start
You're just
thinking about
sitting
life
in it,
and I'm like,
kind of. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
why we're all turning into just existential messes. I think COVID did it. I think
It
definitely
did.
COVID has driven us all a bit
Yeah.
mad.
I thought it was going to be like an apocalypse, COVID.
Yeah, it was.
It was scary.
It
Kinda
was
was.
scary because we didn't really know what was going to
And there definitely are still people.
who still suffer from
Yeah,
that.
100% who are still like nervous about it.
Well,
now.
I definitely think young children, like, all they saw was threat for like 3 years, 2.5 years, whatever it was. And like I have like friends and they're washing their hands all the time. So you've all this kind of compulsion stuff.
Yeah.
It was. I don't think we've even began to process what happened. Like,
No.
And we were just told to get on with things.
Yeah, one day it was just
Yeah,
over.
Just
like,
go. And
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Back to
No-
normal.
Yeah, and none of us have gone back to normal. I think it's
No.
actually collectively like kind of shifted something in everybody.
in everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit.
And it's mad. It's the only thing in the world that we'll all ever go through
yeah.
together.
I
In
think
that
they'll
sense.
talk about it in
We
like
hope.
history books.
yeah,
and all.
Yeah. Yeah, we hope. I don't want to that the
Yeah, that'd
like,
be in history.
another pandemic, but hopefully no like nuclear wars or anything like that.
Oh, don't.
Please
I think we'll
God.
be. I
It's
think
the
we'll be okay.
elections coming up.
Please God.
You then went on to do a master's in mindfulness.
Yeah.
What made you decide to do that? Like, what was and how long was it actually to do? Was it like
I
2
did
years?
2 years masters, and I've always, like, from my own mental health journey, I've always
Mm-hmm.
found found it really difficult to sit still.
Yeah.
I used to get out of a shower and I'd have to keep walking, and I couldn't sleep. I was always felt like there was something just living in me. It sounds
Yeah.
ridiculous, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
I had this energy, and it was just a deep anxiety I had. And
Mhm.
for many reasons, I lived in Israel when I was 13. My dad's, we ended up in the middle of a war, essentially, where you're now seeing in southern Lebanon. We lived there, and there was a war at
Wow.
the time called the 9 Day War, like the 9 Day War, Operation Accountability, and we were in the middle of it. So that triggered all this kind of panic attacks and stuff as a teenager. So I've always had this thing that I couldn't sit with myself or sit
Mhm.
still, and I started studying Buddhism, which people are always terrified of because they especially Irish people, because we have a weird relationship with what we think is religion. Buddhism is not a religion. It's a way of thinking. It's an
Right.
ideology, and then mindfulness is closely linked to that. So I found I started to meditate, and I remember I tell the story. I was so embarrassed that I was meditating. I was so embarrassed that anyone would find out that I was meditating. This was years ago. So I put on like a little YouTube video, and I went up to my bedroom and I put the headphones on. It's like, my dad was down cooking dinner, and I was like, "Oh, what?" So I'll get into this meditation shit, see what it's like. And then about 5 minutes in, I was like, "Oh my god, this is kind of nice. This is love." I was like, I'm starting to I'm starting to relax here. This is ridiculous. This is why am I only following this now?" And then I heard my dad coming upstairs like, "Oh fuck, he's gonna come in." And he comes into my room. He knocks on the door, and I scream at him. I'm like, "I am meditating," and I'm pretty sure he thinks I said something else.
Oh yeah.
Oh
I was
no.
literally just
Yeah.
gonna say to you, a lot of young men would be like embarrassed, like to go upstairs and be doing
Do something
something
else.
else. You
But
know what I
actually, it was
mean?
less embarrassing for me for him
The
to
other
think
thing,
that's what I was
yeah,
doing
yeah, yeah.
That, yeah,
than it was
yeah,
meditating. So I
yeah,
just didn't tell him. And then
yeah.
the irony
Oh,
of all that is, like, a few years later, I'm doing my master's in mindfulness, and I'm teaching it. And this idea, so people who go, "I could never do it," you you couldn't sit me still for 5 seconds. I was
really?
that kind of
Agitated.
uncomfortable with
Yeah.
myself all
Right.
the time. And what meditation, ultimately what mindfulness does, is teaches you to sit with all the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we all have all of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What we tend to do with the ugly stuff is we try to avoid it or push it away,
Mm.
and or pretend it doesn't exist. Whereas with mindfulness, I was like, "Well, I'm going to sit with that. I'm going to that thought or that memory or that thing that freaks you out, and you're like, fuck, I can't believe I did that." And you just sit with it, and then you start to go, "Where do I feel it in my body? Or I feel it in my chest." And then you start to realize you don't need to run from it. And it's that type of stuff that really made me fall in love with this idea of mindfulness. But I wanted to get deeper into it, learn it, and understand all aspects of the psychology behind it. And then my master's, and ultimately now in the middle of my PhD, which a big core part of it is how do we not just mindfulness, but how do we teach mental skills to young children
Mhm.
so they don't feel so overwhelmed by the world. So that's kind of the background of it. But mindfulness there's so much to it. Some people
Yeah.
find it boring. Some people find it life saving. It's not for everybody.
Mm.
I'm not into this wellness stuff where I just start preaching inspirational quotes at people. I
Yeah.
don't know what people are going through.
Yeah.
All I do know is that humans are, there's a beautiful Leonard Cohen quote that he said, "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in."
Mhm.
That's my starting point. We're all a little bit, we all got a bit cracked.
Got
Yeah.
something.
And
Definitely.
it's grand.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
thing about that is, to me, is that I long since walked away from the idea of, like, this is how you should live. I
Mm.
don't know.
Yeah.
What do I know?
Different stuff works for
Yeah,
different
and
people.
different people have different things and different reasons for feeling the way they feel.
Mhm.
But I do think we've created a far more accepting, empathetic society that allows people kind of address that stuff in themselves, and I celebrate that massively.
Yeah. I love how open you are about mental health. I think especially in Ireland there's not enough of it. I think still probably more now than there would have been. But like I think there still is a stigma, especially around men's. I think
Well, I think
Yeah.
we're
to
okay
speak.
with stress and anxiety and
Yeah.
resilience, but actually, when you get into the weeds with the more serious, difficult stuff,
Yeah.
I still think we're very stigmatizing. I still
Yeah.
we fear it, we don't understand it,
Yeah.
and that's the area I've always weirdly said that I find dark stuff far more interesting. I find people who've had difficulty really interesting to talk to.
They're
Yeah.
always real funny.
They know a lot about that, but they all.
Like
but
they just have like
a lot of them don't care. They're
Yeah.
like, but I do find I've kind of an attraction to the darkness,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and not in a depressing way. I just find it really interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, people doing cartwheels up the meadow and everything's great in life. Great, like that's lovely. But the best conversations I've had are with people who are trying to work out things in their heads,
Yeah.
and they're very reflective. They think a lot, and they can be deeply humorous and dark humor. I
Yeah.
love dark humor.
I
love
it's
dark.
the best.
You would love our group chat.
We're, oh.
Be careful with them. Like
No,
dark
we're-
humor. When somebody says something, you're like,
No, all the trauma that
Oh,
we've got,
love
any
it.
of us have gone through, all of some kind of
It's
quote.
the only way.
attached to it.
I don't know, is it an Irish thing or what is it? But like dealing with any sort of trauma, come at it with dark humor. It will just lighten the mood so much
Wonderful
more.
A
stuff.
little bit better.
And you, when somebody says like, yeah, it is. It's a really good coping strategy for
Yeah.
some people, you know. And I think I certainly like. I like it in other people. Like I have friends who just say things about their own stuff that makes it really accessible. And
Yeah.
I had a friend who he lost his mum, and I remember this is the type of way we were at the wake, and his mum and the priest was sitting in the kitchen being all pious and nice and talking to everybody, and he's had his cup of tea, and my mate goes, "Watch this." I'm like, "Oh, what's he gonna do?" And he went up and he just stood beside the priest and just looked at me and went, "That's mummy's cup." And the priest was like, "I'm really sorry," and washed it and all this. And he just kept staring at the priest, and then he walked out, and he was like, we were all like, and then he said to the priest, "I'm only joking,"
Yeah.
but it's just that darkness. And
I
then he
love
sang,
that.
"I
Did
just
the
died in your
priest
arms
know what
tonight
to
at the
do?
funeral."
No, he
That
didn't.
I love this.
Wait, and then he what?
"I just died in your
And-
arms tonight,"
He just sang it.
and it's like an old '80s power ballad, and he got up and sang it at the funeral. It's just, it's
I
gold.
love that.
But
Yeah.
I think it's some people's coping mechanism, isn't it? It
Yeah.
just makes it light.
I think it's the best way.
that's not light.
Mm.
sometimes.
And I think it's perfectly okay to do that. And I
Yeah.
think
About
it's-
your own situation.
Yeah, and once you're not
yeah.
offending anybody or hurting
Of course.
anybody,
No.
you're just saying like it's just a way of coping.
Yeah.
The world can be a very overwhelming place, and
Yeah.
sometimes if you bring a bit of dark humor to it,
Mhm.
there's no harm.
It works.
Lighten it a little bit.
Did you ever try the medicinal route of like anxiety, like medication and things like that?
For many years, yeah.
you?
How did you find it?
For nearly, I never believed I had a broken brain. I never believed there was something. There was something that had happened to me that I never coped with,
Mhm.
and I wanted to kind of get to the bottom of that. And I was on medication for nearly 12 years,
Okay.
Wow.
and it certainly helped me at a time I needed. Like I was certainly all over the shop at one
Yeah.
stage. Even when I was doing The Voice, I was taking beta blockers and Valium. Like I was just to get on TV at certain points because I was terrified I'd have a panic attack on television. That was my biggest fear.
Mm.
So I was having so many of them. But I think ultimately what I needed to do was to try and figure out why I was feeling like that. And that's what happened. I ended up going through treatment with some amazing psychologists who kind of over time kind of got it out of me and allowed me realize that, the way I was probably dealing with things was probably quite normal.
Yeah. For
And
what
that
happened.
was the stuff. I think sometimes I think a good psychologist to make you feel less like you're losing your mind
Yeah.
is definitely quite comforting, and that's what I had. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's many theories. It's a big focus of my PhD research is the interventions we use for people. Like
Mhm.
what should we be using?
Yeah.
And once again, there's a huge subjective element to that. Like it's very hard to know unless you're sitting in front of the person.
Yeah.
What I think the most important thing that should be asked if somebody walks into a room in distress is not what's wrong with you; it's what happened to you. I think it's
Okay.
really important,
Oh wow.
and it's often we don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't.
So not necessarily that something is wrong with you. It's things
Well, in
that
fact, something might be very much right with you. If you
Yeah.
like in my case,
Yeah.
like having panic attacks after experiencing like a war,
War, yeah.
that's quite a healthy response.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
exactly if there's
Yeah.
people
Your body's
listening to this
protecting you, like.
who are anxious after COVID, I would argue that's a pretty good, fair human response to
Yeah.
what we all went through.
Mhm.
Would you say there's something wrong with those? But the problem is it's really uncomfortable. No one likes it. We don't enjoy feeling this way. We all want to be high-fiving and fist-pumping the world and thinking everything's great.
Yeah.
But some of us didn't cope with COVID.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some of, especially young children, are anxious.
Yeah.
And rather than going, just what's wrong with you? I'm like, well, you just went through a global pandemic. That'll do it.
That's
That,
enough.
that'll do it.
That will definitely do it.
What do you think is the line between someone like feeling anxious and then like having like anxiety? Like when is the line of someone being like, right, this actually is not just feeling anxious about something coming up, or like
I think there's a dysfunction to it. And I think,
Okay.
like, I always revert to like Dr. Tony Bates, who was my mentor, or my partner Louise, a psychologist. Like I would ask, so my PhD is research in sociology, so I'm really interested in culture and society, whereas they'd be interested in the individual. And dysfunctional anxiety, like I can only speak in my own case. It affects your relationships, it affects your sleep, it affects your diet, your food, affects it. It's the thing that cloaks over everything. And it can feel very, what happens when I used to get anxious, my world would become very small and I couldn't see anything. I couldn't experience anything. It was just, everything got very small and suffocating. And as I said, I couldn't be in it. My jobs, I left my jobs. Like it's dysfunction. It's probably the best way to
Debilitating, like,
describe
yeah.
it. And then you convince yourself that it's not dysfunctional until it comes to a point where it becomes very clear to others it's become dysfunctional. And in some ways that could be addiction. You might fall into addiction to try and deal with it because you
Yeah.
can't cope with the kind of overwhelm that you experience. And once again, that's my experience of it.
Yeah.
Then what happens with general anxiety that we all experience, like that nerve before something we don't like doing, you need to feed into that. That's a life-saving experience. Human beings are literally anxiety and eggs. That's all we are. That's how we're built. But much of our world is anxiety provoking. And online, you go online for 5 seconds, it's anxiety provoking. That's where we spend most of our lives. So yeah, I think dysfunctional anxiety, from my position and my own case, was it affected every part of my life.
Every part. Yeah.
Every single part of my life. I could not see anything other than what I was experiencing. And then the breakthrough of that was, as I said, I started getting proper help, proper professional help.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that professional help it wasn't a click of a finger, and it certainly wasn't a linear experience. I went through a lot to get through it, and I still go through it. I still experience different things that would happen, and I still get help. I still work with people.
Yeah.
My work can be overwhelming in itself, so I just have literally no fear of speaking about it
Yeah.
in any way. But I do think everyone's experience is very subjective to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that really helps people as well, hearing someone else talk about it so openly.
Yeah.
Because I think it should be. It's like breaking your arm, or like if you go to the doctor about anything, like your head should be treated the same.
The same way.
I wish you could get your brain scanned though, like, and see. Like, I wish you could actually see things.
You see, you can't scan your brain, and it'll tell you how your brain functions.
Yeah, but not your
to
emotions.
me, it's the mind.
Yeah,
Like,
your
and
mind.
I don't know how. Like, so when I'm looking in my research at 200 years of intervention for mental health, when I look at the human mind, I don't know how much further on we were than we were 200 years ago
No.
to really understanding what goes on up there.
Yeah.
And I think good psychologists and psychotherapists kind of are very good at kind of uncovering stuff and stuff like that. But I definitely think part of me is that culture and society. I always say it's not most of the time it's not the individual that has to change, it's their environment.
Yeah.
Like somebody who is overwhelmed by like when I was in school, like in the 80s and 90s, there was children with autism that were just so badly treated. We didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And some teachers were brutal to them.
Yeah.
And that's changed. But now what we have now is we understand this, but we don't have schools and systems that are actively properly supporting people overwhelmed by their worlds. Or imagine Adam Harris. I don't know if you should get him on. Simon's brother. He's one of the top autism activists in the country. He's a charity called As I Am.
Yeah.
And I said to him, he's autism. I said, explain to me what it can feel like sometimes, because I think when we can relate to what it must feel like, it makes it easier to understand. And he said, imagine I just picked you up right now, and without telling you, dropped you into the middle of Tokyo in the middle of the night, where you knew nobody, what was going on. He said, that's what it feels like sometimes, just to leave the house. And what he meant is, it's just the world overwhelms him sometimes.
Yeah.
So I've never been in Tokyo, but I don't want to be dropped into Tokyo.
Feel like that, yeah.
I'd be like, whoa, it's a sensory overload. And that was a great way of explaining it to me. So now I can almost tap into what that must feel like, just to do normal stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff I start to learn. Another friend of mine has a daughter who was so anxious. She's an unbelievable girl, and she's really bright, and she wouldn't leave the house, and she was studying for Leaving Cert, and he was getting really upset with her, and he wasn't getting angry with her, but he was frustrated with her because he couldn't understand what was wrong. So I said to him, right, how do I get through to this, lad? I said, one thing I know about this guy is he hates flying. He'll never get in an airplane. Hates flying. And I said to him, right, tomorrow morning you have to go up to Dublin Airport and get in a flight. What would you do? He goes, I'd be gone. I'd be gone. Forget about it.
Wouldn't do
Forget about
that.
it. You wouldn't get me. Not 5 of you wouldn't drag me onto that thing. I'm like, okay, cool. How do you feel? I goes, I feel like I'm going to get sick. I said, but that's what it's like for your daughter to leave the house.
Yeah.
And now he understands the feeling.
Okay.
Doesn't understand why she feels that way. In the same way that your fear is as irrational as hers. Now you know what she feels. Now he looks at her and goes, she is unbelievable. Look at the strength of her. 'Cause she's getting an airplane every day in his head.
Yeah.
What
It's a
happened then?
different way of kind of looking at it.
It is.
Them,
Their
yeah,
relationship
yeah.
got stronger. What
Yeah.
happens when the relationship gets stronger and he understood? She starts to get stronger.
Get stronger.
And this the thing, and this is you find a way to meet people where they're at with this stuff.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
rather than going, well, why would you feel that way? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I think that helped.
yeah. 100%. You have started a podcast series about St. Loman's. Can you
Mm.
tell us?
I'm
about St.
very
Loman's?
intrigued in this now.
Yeah.
Well,
Very.
I mean, I don't. Part of me is kind of going, why would you want to do a podcast series on a psychiatric institution, an asylum? Like, I'm a glutton. For punishment.
No, like
Um,
love all this.
Yeah, our
so
history with this
interested.
stuff is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, really important, and there's a lot of answers there. I grew up in Mullingar, and there's a psychiatric hospital there called St. Loman's, and
Mm.
it's massive. It's a massive, massive building. It's always terrified me, and
Okay.
everybody I know, lots of my friends' family would have worked there, and it's just huge. In a town like Mullingar, at that time, it would have just been the biggest building there, like
Wow.
like the cathedral and the barracks. But growing up, I was terrified to tell people what was going on for me because I was terrified that's where they put me. Because that was the threat we always had in Ireland.
I'll
Like,
send you
put
to
you into
Loman's.
Lomans. You're going up
Yeah.
to Lomans. I'm like, in my head, it was like,
And that's terrifying.
that's where I
Yeah.
could end up going. So, but for me, I looked at the history. So I looked at, there's a graveyard in St. Lomans, and it's a mass grave. So this is a field. There's 1,304 people buried in that field. And the series is about telling the story of one of them. And one of these women who went in there because she accused her husband of cheating on her. Her husband cheated on her and basically said she threw tea at him and ended up getting committed there and dying 20 years later. And it turns out he was cheating on her because he put the children into a workhouse 2 days after she was put in there. But in Irish law, the person who puts you in has to take you out. So this is what happened with a lot of women, a lot of
Just got
men.
left there.
Without evidence, they would say they're delusional or they're this, that, and the other, and they'd be put into asylums and they died there. A lot of men ended up in asylums for different reasons. Usually, violence and alcoholism was a big one. But this is a part of our history that we haven't even began to address. And so there's this woman buried in that grave, and we were telling her story, and we're telling the story of how she was failed. But more importantly, these places that terrify us, that you kind of said you're intrigued in, the best way to reduce that fear is to humanize them, and the best way to humanize them is to tell the story of people who were in
Okay,
there.
Yeah.
And one line she said in the documentary from her medical records, the opening line was, "I'm not crazy, and neither are half the people in here," and they really weren't. Most of them, there was very little wrong with them. And the problem is, Ireland was an immensely poor country. We had famines, we had civil wars, we had war for independence, we had colonialism, we had all that stuff. And what we had is a very traumatized nation of people.
Mm.
And what did we do with them? We put them into institutions because we didn't know what to do with them. And I wanted to tell that story to humanize it, but more importantly, to rebuild that grave, that cemetery,
Yeah.
and put their names and crosses and actually build a cemetery to those 1,304 people. And to build a memorial wall for them and to make that the symbol of this is young people are so proactive now around destigmatizing mental health.
Mm.
We cannot destigmatize mental health until we understand where the stigma came from.
Okay.
And the stigma came from places like this.
Yeah.
Every film you watch in horror movie is going to have that trope of the guy who breaks out of a psychiatric institution and goes murders loads of people.
Mm.
That's the conditioning we're being hit with. That's where your
Mhm.
stigmas come from.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get this serious and I wanted to tell those stories. So people who might fear places like that will go, oh my God, these are like my mum,
People.
this is
Yeah.
like my sister or my brother. And they really were. And and in 1950, Ireland had the highest level of people in psychiatric hospitals in the world.
Really?
We loved putting people in there.
That's
Do
not
we
even
have-
that long ago.
I
Like,
know, yeah.
if-
Like, how many institutions like that do we have in Ireland? Or did
22.
we have? Sorry.
They call them the district lunatic asylums. That's what they were
That's
called.
what they called them.
That's what you used
Like,
to call
even
them.
the name of them, though, like lunatic.
And it sounds offensive. And then
Yeah.
you see now with people, we still use words like lunatics.
Yeah.
I didn't
Like,
know
we
lunatic
throw
was
around-
an official word. I
It
thought
was. So that's what we
slang.
used to call people, who were put into institutions, was the district lunatic asylum. That's why the series is called the Madman's Hotel, which might sound a little bit offensive to us now, but that was the contextual language of the day. That's how we
Yeah.
spoke
That's
about
what they
people,
used, yeah.
and it's important that we keep that stuff, even if it might offend people. Because I'm not overly concerned about offending people. I'm
No.
more concerned about telling accurate stories
Mhm.
and using the difficult part of our history. And the thing about it is, there's beautiful stories there as well. There's stories of the nurses that used to care for them
Yeah.
because a lot of their families didn't want them. So they know what the saddest part of the whole story. Julie went in there for 20 years. She didn't have one visitor,
Not one.
not one. She sat at that window every day waiting for someone to come see her,
Gee.
and nobody came. And she died of essentially heart
Broken
failure,
heart.
but a broken heart in
Broken heart, yeah.
1919. And she is grave 339. And they used to bury them with numbers, not even a name, like they were prisoners.
That
So
shows how little respect they had.
It's
Like,
just-
when being.
and there's your
like,
stigma.
birds,
So
yeah.
what I'm trying to do is, if people keep talking about reducing stigmas and mental
Yeah.
health, I'm like,
Mm.
if you want to do it, let's learn where they come from.
Yeah.
And even if it's difficult stuff,
Mhm.
let's actually look at. And it's really interesting as well. And it's Ireland's history of how we treated women, especially, is
Yeah.
unless we actually address it, it will darken our society forever. And
Yeah.
you look at the Magnan Laundries, mother and baby homes,
Yeah.
and the asylums, and these are stories that now have to be told. And I always say to families who think they had people in there, I always say, society, your loved one did not fail society. Society failed them.
Felt
Yeah.
them,
And
yeah.
I think that's why we wrote the series.
Wow. And is that still a law now that you have to be the same person that puts you in has to
No,
take you out?
oh no, the legal act
No.
that was called
It's
the
changed.
Dangerous Lunatics Act. That's what it was called. Like,
Jesus.
so there's all these legal acts. There's still a lot of grey area in mental health at
Mhm.
that level,
Mhm.
legality stuff that we got to work out, and that's the work that we do. And the thing about it is, right? I get this. People listening to this go, "Oh my God, that's heavy." This isn't. What's heavy for me is if we ignore it.
Mhm.
What's depressing is if we ignore it.
Mhm.
I think, yes, some people might go, I find that difficult. It is difficult, but I
Mhm.
think it's the right thing to do,
Yeah.
to talk about it. And there's some beautiful stories, and there's some beautiful people, and I've read those stories. There's, without getting into the detail of them, it's not as dark as you might think.
Okay.
It just feels like we didn't know what to do with different, so we buried it,
Yeah.
or we put people in institutions. And there are people who are poets. There was a lovely story of this woman, Hannah Greeley, in St. Albans in Mullingar. She was a poet. She used to write poetry in the canal, writing beautiful poetry, and people was like, "Who's she?" And they put her into an institution after she was a nurse, and during World War II, her hospital was bombed, and she was traumatized by it,
Yeah,
and she was
of
put in
course,
there,
yeah.
and she was in there for 15 years.
And in there, would they be getting any kind of care? Or is it just a place to put them and to say,
They used to
Kinda
care
put
for
them
them.
away and
Yeah.
not
They used to
worry.
care. I think when it started, it was
Mhm.
a place of refuge, and then they just become so overcrowded that they couldn't do anything. They just had to numb them, and then some of the treatments were really difficult, like the lobotomy, where
Lobotomy, yeah.
and then insulin coma therapy. They used to give people malaria, so they would go into, they'd have seizures from a fever, thinking that would be the thing that kicks out the madness. So this stuff is what happened, and I think it's really interesting. Once again, that there's so many elements of this that still kind of prevail in our current mental health system. And people always keep saying, why is our mental health system so dysfunctional? Because I think we haven't even began to address
Oh, no.
this stuff.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
And I think we have to do it. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to be doing this all my life. It's not,
Yeah.
it's tough stuff.
I can
Yeah.
imagine.
Uh, But it's also, it's storytelling.
Yeah.
And what we are doing with the Madman's Hotel is telling a story. And when you tell a story, it makes it easier for people to listen,
Mhm.
rather
Yeah.
than going, all these bad things happened, this place was terrible.
Just saying all the bad
There's
things.
all the
yeah.
facts. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm quite hopeful about what this hopefully will do. That
Mhm.
will, I think I'd love to see a state apology. I'd like to see
Yeah.
whoever's our next Taoiseach apologise to the
Mhm.
families, and not for any form of kind of blaming anybody, but just
No.
it's the right thing to do. I think it would
Yeah.
go a long way to make a lot of these families feel a little bit less stigmatized. And
Yeah.
I I would be. I think Ireland could be the real symbol to do it. And I think no other country has ever done that.
Yeah.
Why not us?
Yeah.
Did you go down to Loman's in Mullingar? Inside?
I wasn't inside for this, but I have been inside St.
Have you?
Loman's. Yeah, and the really strange thing was like we were trying to get access to the medical records, but we understandably we couldn't. But we were almost easier to find medical records by going on TikTok and watching the lads who were breaking into St. Loman's.
Okay.
There's like loads of
People do
TikToks
that?
of lads breaking into St. Loman's and
we're
filming it.
finding medical records.
And they were filming medical records. So I think, to be fair to the HSE, they got an awful shock when that happened, and now they've moved to archive all those records to protect them. Yeah,
Okay.
and so some of those records will be Julia's records. So
Yeah.
Julia, who was in there, who we told the story of,
Mhm.
we have 7 pages of her medical records, but there's 100 pages missing.
Wow.
Families have a right to those.
How would you go about
Yeah.
getting all the medical records then? Does it have to be family that gets them?
Yeah.
Like, is
That's
it okay?
HSE.
So
then.
you'd fill out
Yeah.
a freedom of information, and you'd ask the HSE for them, and they might give them to you. They mightn't.
They might not, yeah.
That's the problem. There's no actual. It's too vague,
Yeah.
and they might give you the records, but some pages are missing, or they'd redact, they take out certain words, so they'd blacken certain words. So we got to have a template for what we do. Some families won't want them, and
Yeah.
even recently we saw around adoption records, like, because of our history of institutionalization, we got to get much more kind of definitive of how families are allowed access to these records, because it really does help them make sense of what happened. So they're trying to piece together Julia's life.
Yeah.
Did anyone visit her? Did she get out at any stage? Was she perfectly fine? They don't know, because they only have 7 pages of her records. So these are the things that we want to know.
Yeah.
And I think families have a right to.
And
be honest.
it probably affects generations as well, like generational trauma going on, not knowing what happened to your granny or great, like whoever it is.
There was a
It's
really
tough.
beautiful story, and without giving away too much of
Yeah.
the show, was there was a farmer from Westmeath, big farmer, and he lovely warm character, and we were putting the crosses back in. He was holding the cross of his great grandmother, and he was holding it across his chest. And I said to him, do you mind me asking why this is so raw for you? Like, she died 90 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
He says, because that woman affected my grandmother, and affected my mother, and it affected me.
Yeah.
Because that shame of her was passed on and passed on and passed on.
Yeah.
So I'm not putting this in the ground for just my great grandmother. I'm putting it in the ground for my family. And it's just that stuff. I think that's stuff I didn't think about
And you meet
Yeah.
people
when I was
like
doing
that,
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's a good story. I think what I'd love to see happen to St. Loman's is, there's a place called Grange Gorman, which is just up the road. It was the biggest asylum in Ireland. It's now one of the most impressive universities I have ever seen.
Wow.
Unbelievable campus. They've turned it into this world-class
Oh, wait, in
educational.
Dublin?
Yeah, it's
I
just
went
up
there.
in Phibsborough.
I went,
Did you?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I dropped out, but I did go there.
Well,
once.
that used to be
tried.
Grange Gorman. That used to be
That
the
was an
biggest asylum in the
asylum.
country.
Was it?
And they've done this unbelievable job. And I'm looking at St. Loman's and go, let's do that to St. Loman's. Let's turn it into a place where we can educate nurses, doctors,
Yeah.
psychiatrists,
Turn it into
psychologists.
good.
Is it
do
just
something.
derelict now?
Yeah, I think there's asbestos and all sorts of shit. We're not allowed to touch the front. Like, as scary as it is, it's a very impressive building.
Yeah.
It's fairly
Yeah.
slick. Like, I wouldn't go into it now if you paid.
Would you
but-
still be how you felt when you were younger?
No,
about it?
because now I know the stories. I've
Yeah.
humanized it. I wouldn't sleep in there now, but I've
Go
humanized
for a night
it.
away or
No, I
anything,
wouldn't
like.
be. The actual, there's a hotel in Sligo that used to be, I think, St. Column's, or something like that, and now is the Clayton Hotel in Sligo. That was one of the biggest asylums in the Northwest. I think Paul Mescal told a story about waking up in the middle of the night there and
Ah,
something moving in his room. But
Mammy.
so I don't know if Paul Mescal maybe he was on the beer or something.
Yeah.
maybe,
Who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows?
And those 1,304 graves, like, why did they do that instead of bring them to an actual graveyard?
Because for many reasons, it's a really good question. A lot of the families, there was nowhere to bury them because the families didn't want to.
Didn't
deal
want
with
nothing to
it.
do with them.
I don't want to deal with it. I don't want that. I don't want to deal with it. I don't
very
want to know that
sad.
my loved one was in St. Loman's, so just bury them in the hospital. Some families did take their loved ones out and bury them in
Okay.
cemeteries in the
Yeah.
family plots. But the really some of the other stuff that was pretty grim was we've records of patients having to dig the graves for the other patients. So that type of stuff was pretty depressing.
Knowing that's what it.
Heavy, like.
Yeah.
Where they might end up. And yeah, and that's the thing. Like, they did a dig. The archaeologist John Tierney did an amazing dig of the place, and he kind of told us, like, some kids over there. You know, it was so all we want to do is when you walk in there now, there's 12 crosses of families that have come forward that said we want to put loved ones' crosses back in with their names on it. So we got the crosses for them, we put their names on it. What I would love to see is that field full of them.
Yeah.
And the families coming forward and going, I want to do that for my loved one. And I want to bring my my grandchild there and say, this is where your great and educate people in this stuff. And I'd love to see it turn into a beautiful garden and make it symbolic. Like, can't pretend this didn't happen.
Yeah.
But we can use it as a symbol for where we want to go
Yeah.
and what we want to do, and acknowledge that that a lot of these people were failed. Let's not get into the blame game side of it. Let's do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of ultimately a big memorial wall. My dream is that there's a memorial wall there with everybody's name on it.
Yeah.
Now, we're probably going to need consent for everybody's name on it.
Yeah.
And we mightn't get everybody's name on it. And we might only get 100, but that's 100 more than we would have had.
Then you would have.
Yeah.
I think
How
it'll look
hard do you
beautiful.
think it's going to be to find everyone?
I just hope families come forward.
Yeah. Is
That's-
that what it's going to take? Is
Yeah, I mean,
families
we
to
have the
form?
records, like but the right thing would be that the families come forward and say, there's no shame here.
Yeah.
I would love my loved one's name to be on that wall. I'd love to see that. And I think we'd have to work very closely with the HSE here. It's easy for us to say this. The HSE are a massive organisation. And, we often hear the difficult stories of the HSE, but they've been pretty good, I'll be honest. And this is a sensitive, difficult area for them. Definitely not on their top of their priority list.
No. Yeah.
But they've been pretty good. Like, and I interviewed the CEO, Bernard Gloucester, on the series, and he apologized.
Did he?
And then the other thing he did that I thought was really quite incredible. I asked him, "What are we going to do?" And he goes, "I don't know."
Okay.
When someone says that to you,
Yeah.
don't throw it back in their face.
Yeah.
People go, "Well, he's the CEO." It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He actually, if somebody has the humility to say, "I don't actually know the answer,"
Yeah.
Yeah.
then we got to go, right, let's have a think about what we think we can do.
Okay.
Let's do it together. Let's figure out what that might be. But I think that to me was quite a humbling thing to hear somebody with that hype. Because you tell a politician, they'll always come up with some answer.
Some answer that never happens.
And
yeah.
And you'd be like,
what you want to hear.
Yeah. And he goes, get me out of this interview. That's probably what you're thinking. Whereas he went, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I've never thrown back in someone's face. So
Yeah.
hopefully we can do something with that.
Yeah. What initially grabbed your attention to do the series? Like, you obviously always knew what St. Loman's was, but like, what made you think, okay, I want to like deep dive into it?
What happened to me was, it's just a mad story. I got a petition sent to me, an uplift petition from a friend of mine. And he said, restore 1,304 graves in St. Loman's. And I was like, no, thank you. I'm not dealing with that. I was all over the shop at that point. I was like, what I don't need in my life is to start looking at cemeteries and asylums.
Yeah.
And then it just kept coming back.
Really?
And 4 years later, it was mad. The joke is the Blizzards were supporting the Black Eyed Peas in Galway. Mad story. And the girl, Julie, who's Julia's great granddaughter, was in Galway. And I got this, she was the one who started the petition. And I just got this text going, I see her in Galway. And I rang her. And the minute I talked to her, I went, I'm in.
Really?
I'm in this story.
That's all it took.
I can't. I was like sitting there and I was on the phone to her. And Will.I.Am walks past, I'm not the world's biggest Black Eyed Peas fan, but I wanted to meet Will.I.Am.
Yeah, of course.
And he walked past, and I was going, do I hang up on this? I went, no, I won't. So I chose Julie Clark over Will.I.Am, and it was the best decision I've ever made. So yeah, and I ultimately met him then after. Asked him, do you want to go Supermax? But he had no interest.
Did he go?
No, he did.
He was lovely though. We were the worst. Like, I don't know why we were supporting them. Like we were like kind of quite a loud guitar band.
Yeah.
And then it was Gabrielle, who was amazing, and Black Eyed Peas, and then we were on. And people were like, so these young Black Eyed Peas fans going, who are these lads? But still going to do it. Got to meet Black Eyed Peas.
Yeah.
Minus Fergie.
Oh,
was she not there?
No, she wasn't in it. She was gone. Yeah.
Oh.
Which was kind of, I would have thought she was the Black Eyed Peas.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, well, Will.I.Am and her was like, but she was gone, I think, about 2 years at that stage. They were still brilliant.
Who's the most famous person you've like supported or even met?
We supported Oasis in Slane Castle. Yeah, that was
nice?
definitely
Did you meet?
lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. And Noel Gallagher wouldn't get a photograph of me, and I was like, raging, and he goes, "You're just too tall." And I was like,
Is
And
he
then
really small?
he's quite, but he was joking, and then he kind of got up in a little step and took
He
the
has to
photograph.
stand on a
Yeah,
step.
but nobody. He was kind of just because I was like, I was in a pair of wellies, so I had heels on.
Yeah.
And got a photograph of him, and then Liam came in like 2 hours later, and they're obviously they were in different dressing rooms anyway. But then AC/DC, we supported AC/DC the week after that
Wow.
in
Huge.
Punchestown. So they were our two big kind of what are we doing here? And I remember Deckard, the drummer who I grew up with, we were walking on stage at AC/DC. He used to play AC/DC on the drums, like air drums behind me in French class.
Wow.
And I remember just thinking, this is just ridiculous. This is mad. Like, how are
You
we?
just have to kind of stop yourself and be like,
How
what
are
is
we
this?
Take it
here?
all
Yeah.
in. Like,
This is ridiculous. And we were the wrong band to be supporting AC/DC. Like, we're not a heavy rock band.
No, yeah.
So there was like 70,000 metalers in Punchestown going, who are these lads? And the first thing I said is like, what would you guys do? Like, if someone said, do you want to support AC/DC? I'm like, I'm not going to
Obviously,
say
you're
no.
gonna
Yeah,
say yeah.
no.
So I know they were actually lovely. We ended up playing Beat It by Michael Jackson. He had died a couple of days before that. And
Wow.
all the metalers like singing Michael Jackson, which was some experience. But yeah, I've been very lucky with that stuff. That's where you really you learn a lot about yourself walking on stage in front of 60,000 metalers.
I
Do you ever
can
meet
only
anyone that's
imagine.
real rude? Any celebs?
You see, I always wary of saying this because
No, I know.
not because
You don't say who. But
no, I don't mind saying who, but it's some people are just having a brutal day.
true.
Yeah,
And
could
it's
be a
this
bad
idea.
day.
I hate that stuff on TikTok when they go, I met this person and they were. I mean, if it's the same person,
Sometimes it's over and
Over
over.
and
and
yeah, and then
over
that's
and
fair
over.
enough.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that there may be a bit of a kind of a, but maybe that's what the algorithm's doing. But like,
True.
I've never met an absolute. What I would suggest is usually the really really famous people, the big people, and I've met loads of them. They're actually always the soundest.
I've
It's
heard that
the
before.
ones trying to hustle up the game a little bit. that
Yeah.
kind of
Their
feel like,
ego might be a little bit too
there was one.
big
I'll
type
tell you.
thing.
I won't tell you. Well, we were doing a gay. We were doing it was on The Voice, and it wasn't the band. It was their tour manager,
Okay.
and they were a big band, and they were performing on
Mm.
it. And he came in, and he was so horribly rude to our stage manager, who I loved. She was the coolest, best woman. She kept me going the whole time. And she came in, and she's really stoic, strong woman. And she came into my dressing room, and she was just white. She was shaking. She goes, I've never been spoken to like that before in my life. I said, sit down there a second. I went out to him.
Did you?
Oh, I went out, and I just said to him, and I knew as I was walking up to him,
Yeah.
something's gone wrong for this lad today. Something
Okay.
bad has happened to him. And so rather than get angry with him, I says, do you think the way you spoke to her was warranted? And he went, it's the game we're in. I'm like, no, it's not the game we're in, dude. You
Yeah.
can't speak to people like that. And then I was ready to blow because it was what he said to her was no.
No.
No, nice.
And
Yeah.
then he just went, and he just put his hand over his head. He goes, I'm having a really rough day. And I said, that's fine. I said,
Mhm.
and we all lose our cool. Like, and I said, you can't speak like that. It doesn't look good for the band.
No.
And then he was shaking. I was like, oh my God. So easily I could have been like, but I brought him into the dressing room, and he just made this quite a very sincere apology.
Okay.
And you see, in the reason I'm saying this story is like we could have just went, he's horrible.
Yep.
He's horrible, and the band
Yeah.
are horrible, and they're all too big for the boots, and all that kind of stuff. But if you give it a bit of time, there's generally a reason someone's acting like
Yeah.
that. But I think in the UK, what I have found is you definitely have more. Celebrity is much more a thing in the UK, where
Yeah.
they think there's a level of entitlement, and I don't think anyone has entitlement. I
No.
don't think anybody has it. I don't think it exists as much in Ireland at all. But I don't think it's in the UK. It's often the managements and the agents that make them out that way. So like you're
Yeah.
this person,
Yeah.
and that's
Big
just
them up to kind of be
big them.
like.
But that's
Give
just
them a big
agencies
head.
trying to make their
Yeah.
commission,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
by telling them,
Oh, of course.
this like. And sometimes they'd come over, and I'd say to them when they're coming on The Voice, like, lads, this doesn't work like that here.
No.
No.
You can't be acting
Bring
like
them
that.
back down a peg.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't be. And actually, like we were very lucky in The Voice. We had a couple of we had Dolores O'Riordan, like Dolores and me were very close, and Dolores was she was one of the most iconic female singers of all time.
Yeah.
Would you think it?
No.
No,
Yeah.
no, she did. She just had the crack, and she used to we go for walks before shows together and just
Aw.
walk around and chat, and she was just that that's what I mean. Biggest
Yeah.
one of the greatest female singers of all time.
I think Irish people, it's just, we've said it before, we're like, you actually couldn't be Like,
He wouldn't be
Too
allowed.
big for your
yeah,
boots.
you wouldn't be allowed.
No.
We had Niall Horan on the podcast before, and we were like, "What? He's like that," and he was lovely.
Oh,
I'm
he's
like,
in Mullingar.
couldn't
Yeah.
Of
not.
course he is.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
But like anyone I've ever met that's Irish is always just
You
like
just can't have
His
that.
greatest
you have the
achievement,
mutual.
Niall's
understanding.
greatest achievement, and I know obviously he's sold millions of records, and he said that is that. For what I can tell, he's still the same guy.
Yeah, he's still
100%.
That's
From
his
what we
greatest achievement.
still
Yeah.
Niall from
and,
Mullingar.
and you can't be like that world they're in is it's unless you're in it, it's impossible to understand. I can't understand it. You
No.
can't. You just
No.
couldn't.
no.
And yeah, he just that. I think that's his greatest achievement. I think hopefully that's something, that he understands in himself. And I look at his group of friends. They're all the same.
Yeah.
Same lads. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's not an easy world. I'd say they're in.
No.
You couldn't give me all the money in the world to do it.
Could you not?
No.
Me
No.
neither.
Couldn't do it.
Have that level
That
of
level
fame.
of fame is.
Scary.
I don't think it's healthy for anyone to have that level of fame.
No.
I feel like it's like everything you do is under a microscope. Like you have constant people watching you and going wherever you are. Like that's
You're held to a standard then as well.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
every move you
And
make
at
is
the end of it,
scrutinized.
he was like Niall,
So
and
young.
obviously, what happened with Liam is just
Yeah.
heartbreaking. These guys
Devastating.
were so young, and there's nothing prepares you for it. There's nothing you can do to prepare
No.
for it.
Yeah.
No.
And
There's no
cer-
manual on it.
No, and everyone has different
especially- yeah.
personality types. Certain people deal with things better, and other people can't. So it's a difficult one, and I think I always say, like, if I had children, would I let them into the music industry? That side of the music industry, I'd rather them play rugby.
Rather not. Yeah.
And that's saying
yeah.
something. you
Really.
That's
know?
saying something if
Yeah.
he says rugby
Yeah.
over that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just don't know. I don't think it's regulated enough. I
Yeah.
don't think there's enough true understanding at the label level of human psychology and
Yeah.
insecurity and all the stuff that comes with that. And I think you throw into the mix social media, and now you're in the Wild West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Different ball game.
I think if labels continue to do that there has to be far stronger mechanisms in place.
To protect.
And then the
people.
thing is that we start saying, oh, well, there's loads of money. That argument doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't
doesn't
outweigh it.
matter. Frailties. Like if you're going through stuff, and you don't know what to do. You don't have the right people around you. It's
Mm.
terrifying.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think Niall has done. Like, and also, like, what I really respect about Niall is I remember him talking to me years ago about like bands like the Eagles, right? And that's the music I want to make. I want to make that, and that's what he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, he's
Yeah.
making the music he loves.
Stuck to what
Yeah.
you said. Kind of.
The music he listens to.
Yeah.
and
I
listen to.
seen him supporting Lloyd Daniels in the academy before he went
Wow.
on X Factor, and I was in the queue to meet Lloyd Daniels with my mum, and he was down on the stage. He was selling CDs. I was like, "Mum, please, can I go in?" She was like, "No, we're in the queue now. We're not going." And I was raged, and I seen him X Factor.
Oh.
I remember
He
when the X Factor just kicked off. I was living in London at the
Yeah.
time, and I kind of, cause this little young lad from Mullingar only up the
Mm.
road, and he arrived at my house one day. But they were about to go on a tour for What Makes You Beautiful, and I'd heard the song. I'm like, oh my god, they're going to be huge, because I just knew it was a hit. I just
Yeah.
knew it
So
was a
good,
pure
yeah.
pop hit. I
Yeah.
just knew this was going to explode. They were already exploding. I said, this is the thing. And he came arrived with this guitar with like 3 strings in it. He goes, will you fix my guitar up? He goes, because I'm going to be playing the guitar on the radio tour, like, because we're off to do the radio tour. So we were sitting there like tuning this piece of shit guitar. Like, but you not buy yourself a decent guitar here, like, but they hadn't kicked off at that stage.
No.
And then I was watching on BBC One the next day with this guitar playing What Makes
Stop.
You Beautiful. Yeah, and
Wow.
I remember hearing it going, whoa,
Yeah.
you just know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
just know.
straight
But,
away.
yeah, and that's it. That was it. Into orbit.
Where can people listen to the series?
Yeah.
It's only on
What
Audible.
platforms?
So
Okay, Audible,
Audible,
okay.
a lot of people have like Audible is it's where I listen to, like, you've just so much
Books
books and amazing documentaries on it. It's just
Yeah.
an incredible platform. I've always loved it. So it's a real. I'm just chuffed to be on it
Yeah.
with this. So
Wow.
yeah,
I'm gonna
it's
get it
gonna
for
be
the
Audible.
drive home now.
Yeah, listen, and I think it's
Yeah.
like, I think
Definitely.
it's quite an emotional thing to listen
Okay.
to. It's not that. Some people go, I got angry, I got sad, I got emotional, I got
Yeah.
just happy.
Bit of
Different
everything.
feelings.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
You'll go through it all, but ultimately, what I think it is, it's us recognizing what happened, and I do this work for one reason only. I think we can be world leaders at what we should do for mental health. I think Irish people believe in fairness above everything else.
Yes.
Mhm.
I think it's a huge part of our psyches, and I think we're a tiny little country, 5 million people. Like, we're the size of like Greater Manchester. We're wealthy. We're relatively politically stable.
Mhm.
Most of us are pretty sound. we're internationally. Why can't we be the people that set the bar? Why can't
Yeah.
we show the world what to do?
So true.
Let's be the case study for how we better take care of people who find themselves overwhelmed by the world.
Yeah.
And anyone listens, we could all be there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and I think things like grief, relationship issues, stress, stuff we all deal with, and sometimes we can't quite cope with it. And I think it's important to understand. Like, I'm glad that we no longer put people in places
In
like
places
that who
like- Yeah.
can't cope. So that to me is the hopeful element of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Mm.
Amazing. No, thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you so much.
Thanks for
Niall.
having me.
Amazing. Thank
Nice one.
you.
Cheers, guys.
So that was it for this week's episode of the podcast.
That was us.
I have to tell the story because I told Niall off camera. But my mom, our moms both
Lord.
love him. And when I was doing a orchestra concert in the concert hall, I think was it in school, secondary school?
Were you
I
playing
think
the
it might have been.
violin?
I was playing the violin, yeah. Or else I was singing. I've done things in the concert hall. My mom came and she was in the bathroom and she overheard people talking, and she thought they said that Bressie was coming, and she was absolutely buzzing. And then turns out it was the president. She misheard it, like Bressie, like she got it wrong. But yeah, I know she's buzzing to come on the podcast.
She was fuming.
Said
It was
she's gonna be
just
first
the
listen.
president.
She's like, for fuck's sake, just Michael D. Like, I love
No,
Michael D.
that was a really interesting chat.
Really,
I
really
really enjoyed that, and I
Yeah.
genuinely am gonna go on download that
Listen to
audio
it,
and
yeah.
listen to it.
It is so important I think, to know about
Highlight
these
these
things
things.
in our past, because like
Mm.
it is generational trauma. Like, you know that you store trauma that if your nanny went through it, it's actually in you.
Like in
So
my
women-
genes, like
Women carry 3 generations of trauma in them.
really.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So
mad.
little things, it's like the more you know, and it does really, like, when we think of like her first heard of St. Loman's, you think of it as a building and a thing, but like Niall said, when you humanize someone, it
Yeah.
makes it all feel more real. and
You
you
don't just
process it.
look at the building itself and the concrete and the bad things that
And
happen.
the number of people, it's
Yeah.
like the actual people
Yeah.
itself. Yeah.
Mad.
So interesting and so important for us.
Mhm.
But you can go back to listen to our bonus episode as well if you want to after this. For Monday, we have some dilemmas and things in there, which is
Mhm.
Home I Drink Extra Juice. And don't forget, you can watch us now on YouTube too.
Hello.
Every Thursday at 12. We have full YouTube videos too.
Yes.
We'll see you then.
Is that us?
Also, if you haven't bought your tickets yet for the live shows, head to UCH box office for tickets for November 23rd in Limerick. And we will see you there.
We'll see you in Limerick, bird.
Like, rate, and subscribe.
Thanks.
Love yous.
Love you. Bye.
I burped.